What's up, Lake Valley? Hope everybody's doing good. We're getting into the holiday season. This is your tutorial for your home group lessons. And we are on the heels, just finished up with ShareFest. Had a great opportunity to apply what we're talking about in regards to helping others. And one of the things that Drew talked about last Sunday, and these are going to be some of the questions that we talk about, is he used the hand. He talked about in kingdom economics and that the idea of God's hand and our hands, and in the text, the phrase is actually used, hardened hearts and closed hands. And if you look back at Lake Valley's history, we certainly have been a generous church. Generosity is a huge value of ours. And so opening our hands is not something hard for us to do. But as we've studied Deuteronomy, and we're going to look at specifically this text, who are we thinking about when we think about giving? Is it just giving to anybody in need? We actually think that the text, it's consistent throughout the Bible, that we need to give strategically to a certain kind of person. Now the text uses the word poor, it uses the word stranger, it uses the word sojourner or traveler, but it's in the context of among you. So when Moses is talking to Israel, he often will say, those poor among you, or the stranger among you, or the traveler among you. And we feel like this is really important. It's also consistent in the New Testament that giving and generosity was something that was shared within the family, within the body, but that doesn't just include us. I think a key phrase would be that it includes those within our sphere of influence or our relationships. So, let's answer this first question. In light of the kingdom economics, as Drew talked about, why are God's people supposed to be generous to the poor, to the stranger, and to the sojourner? Well, the number one reason in the text is because that's who we were. We were all foreigners. And so he reminds them of back of their time in Egypt. And he reminds them that he's the one that saved them up, brought them up. He opened his hand to them and lifted them up out and has blessed them to be a blessing to other people. And so that's the first important reason. The second is because it represents the heart of God, that God is so generous with us, we should be generous with one another, and it keeps us close to Him. The human heart is desperately wicked. It tends to have its own way. It can be selfish. It can be self-centered. And this is a way of keeping our hearts pure before God, is opening our hands to those in need, especially those among us, those within our sphere of influence. So when we think about who are the poor, the stranger, and the traveler, I would want you to think about your own life and where you travel. We go to schools. We have neighborhoods. We have soccer teams and volleyball teams and football teams, and there are relationships within those places and the places that we go. This is the community that we live in. And so a relationship is really important. It's important just more, not only because God says give to those among you, but we've understood that sometimes we can actually hurt people that are poor by just giving them a handout. And Drew talked Sunday about sometimes it's okay to give a handout. But it's so much more strategic when we have a relationship with someone, something that's ongoing. Like the two examples from ShareFest. The one I want to bring up first, I think it's a perfect example of what we're talking about. Because through a relationship of pastors, I met Andrew. And Andrew is a pastor of a Pentecostal church off Leonard Street. And we've developed a relationship. He was telling me about his church and some of the needs that they had. It's a very small church. Andrew reaches a group of people in Hot Springs that very few of us can reach. They have a lot of needs. And so we saw this need within his church to help out, and we were able to use some of our money at Lake Valley. But just even more than that, we stood with these men, and the men that worked on our project, there weren't any women that worked on this project. That doesn't mean they couldn't, but there just weren't. And we built a relationship. And we repaired the basement and built and remodeled a place for them to meet. And the beauty of this is that next day was Sunday. We worked on Saturday. The next day on Sunday, some of the men from Lake Valley went to church there on Sunday night and fellowshiped and enjoyed worship with this church. And so I can see how important this relationship and giving is to those in need. It's not just a gift, but it's time. It's making an investment relationally. And so the last question for this section would be, how can we do this today? This is just a great example of a way. But specifically, I want you to think about your sphere of influence and who are those around you that you have relationships with that are in need, and how could you meet those needs? The second part of your lesson tonight is from Deuteronomy 16. And Deuteronomy 16 mentions three specific festivals that Israel was to have. The first festival was Passover, and the Hebrew word is Pesach. The second festival is the festival of first fruits, and the third festival is the festival of tabernacles. Now, what is a festival? The idea of a festival is a party. And Drew talked about this a little bit in his sermon in 15, how God wanted Israel to celebrate, to enjoy and spend money and enjoy all that God had given them. And so the question we would ask is, what is the significance of each festival? First of all, Passover was a more solemn festival or ceremony that reminded Israel of two things primarily. Number one, that when they were in Egypt, they were to sacrifice a lamb, put the blood of the lamb over the doorpost of their house, and the angel of death would pass over that home and protect them from death. And so to remember that by sacrificing a lamb and shedding of blood. And also Passover represented leaven, because in haste they had to leave in the middle of the night. They couldn't wait for the bread to rise, and they had to leave, and God rescued them out of bondage, out of slavery. And so this festival, this is important once a year to go back to that story and remember what God did for them as Israelites. The other two festivals, the festival of first fruits and the festival of tabernacles, are celebrations. They're like parties. And they are at strategic times in the year. The festival of first fruits was at the beginning of the harvest season. And before you got your harvest out of your field, you gathered up a portion of that harvest, the first fruits, the very best. If you looked at your crop and you saw the very best corner, the very best section that grew the best, you take that and you offer that up to the Lord as a thanksgiving to all God has blessed you with. Lots of symbolism here. It's important for us in giving to give out of the top, give off the top. It represents to us God's provision and how everything we have belongs to Him. Very important celebration for Israel to help them again remember who they were and who blessed them. And in this text, again, we come back to the idea God says to share this festival with the poor and those in need, the stranger in your land, those among you who are in need. And the last festival is the festival of tabernacles or booths. And this is at the end of the harvest season. After we had gotten all the harvest out of the field, we have a 7-day celebration. Now, if you remember, when Israel was in the wilderness, they lived in tents, or they lived in booths. And the presence of God was kept in the tabernacle. And so the tabernacle is where the presence of God was, and they depended upon God to know where to go for food. They were dependent upon Him. And so this is a festival, a 7-day festival, and literally they were encouraged to live in tents for these 7 days. And remember how God provided for them and how His presence was with them. And He protected them day by day. Now, in the sermon, I'm going to draw some links to the New Testament, because all of these festivals and these feasts have a fulfillment in the New Testament. Why did God require it? He required it for them to not forget, to remember who He did and what He's done. These tangible things help us identify with what's really true about God and about ourselves. Have you ever received an invitation? You know, when you receive an invitation, it's like, wow, I'm invited. It makes you feel, you recognize somebody thought of you. It makes you feel a part of something. And vice versa. Have you ever heard about an invitation someone got and you didn't get one? And how that made you feel? You were not included. And you kind of question why and what's different than me or about me. Well, these festivals were important times throughout the year of Israel. But think about what it would be like to have a festival. When you have a party or you send an invitation, who do you invite? Well, most likely you invite the people you know, the people you like. You think about who you want to be with. Well, God is going to challenge Israel, and He's going to challenge us, because He tells us to not show partiality in this text, to not leave out those in need, but invite them in to your party. So we have a great opportunity in this time of our year, of our life. Lake Valley, we are in November. What do we celebrate in November? We celebrate Thanksgiving. We are thankful for all God has given us. Most likely, you're going to have a party. I know I am. You're going to eat. You're going to have food. You're going to do fun stuff with your family and friends. Don't forget to invite the poor. Who are the poor among you? Who are the strangers? Who are those who are not included? Invite them to your party and honor God by blessing them with all that you've been blessed with. Thanks.